U.S. homelessness hits highest level as rents have soared. I thought we were having this great economy. Keaton, what happened?
Yeah, no, people don't know it. That's why they're not paying their rent
how
because
good they have it.
Yeah, they have it
They're
in their
sleeping out on the
their
street.
mind that the rent is too expensive and that they can't afford houses. I don't know because that's not actually a thing, but apparently they think it. You know, they're manifesting it. Like that movie, what was it? Sphere, the book, the Michael Crichton book.
Yeah, right. What you visualize.
What you visualize comes to be. So if you think the rent is going to go up 25%, it does. It's their fault for thinking of it.
A lot of these people, they just want to live by the beach.
Yeah,
That's how they live by the beach. They set up a towel tent. It's very nice.
Yeah.
As housing in the U.S. has become increasingly unaffordable over the past few years, the number of people experiencing homelessness surged to its highest level on record this year, according to an annual survey taken in January. The number of unhoused people, I'm going to say homeless. Every time I see that, I'm going to say homeless, because that is one of the dumbest examples of language engineering I have ever seen. It literally means the same fucking thing. It is literally exactly the same meaning. The number of homeless people in the United States jumped by 12% early this year from the year before, an increase of about 70,650 people, according to an annual report from HUD released on Friday. Known as a point-in-time estimate, the annual snapshot looks at the number of individuals nationwide who are living in shelters, temporary housing, and unsheltered settings on one night last January. The report found that more than 650,000 people were experiencing homelessness. Oh, thank you. That night, the most since reporting began in 2007. Homelessness is solvable and should not exist in the United States, said HUD Secretary Marcia Fudge in a statement. We've made positive strides, but there is still more work to be done. This data underscores the urgent need for support for proven solutions and strategies that help people quickly exit homelessness and that prevent homelessness in the first place. Homelessness increased nationwide across all household types, the report found, but had an outsized impact on communities of color. While black people make up about 13% of the U.S. population, they comprise 37% of people experiencing homelessness and 50% of the people who are experiencing homelessness as a member of a family with children. The Asian or Asian American population saw the biggest increase in the rate of homelessness between 2022 and 2023, with a 40% increase. About 3,313 more Asian and Asian American people were homeless. The biggest numerical growth in people experiencing homelessness was among Latinos. Between federal fiscal year 2021 and 2022, the number of people who became newly homeless increased by 25%, even as the number of people who exited homelessness to permanent housing increased by 8%, according to the HUD report. This rise is the result of a combination of factors, according to HUD. Rent has climbed significantly over the past few years.
That'll do it.
By November, you think? By November of this year, I can't believe what the median is. By November of this year, the national median asking rent in the U.S. was beginning to come down some, but it is still 22% higher than it was in November 2019 before the pandemic housing boom, according to Redfin. And the median asking rent for all apartments was just 4% below the $2,054 record high hit in August 2022. I can't believe that's the national average.
Yeah.
Like that's getting into like New York rent.
Yeah. It's like New York rent. It's unbelievable. That's like $24,000 a year now. And as rents increase alongside inflation, what do we have? We have spiking credit card debt as well, which means people's credit scores are taking a hit, which makes it harder to find a new apartment when you get priced out of the one you're already in. And that's where, to play devil's advocate and somewhat defend the choice of the word unhoused, a lot of people are choosing to be a homeless just because it's just too much of a hassle, too expensive to get a place, right? Which I understand. That's a distinction without a difference. But it is a situation where, like, you have a lot of people now who are choosing to do, you know, what a friend of ours did. I won't say his name in case he doesn't want it said, but, you know, fuck it, pack it up, hit the road, be a nomad. You know what I mean? Like, people are choosing to do that now because they're just getting priced out of their places.
To live in RVs, campers.
Exactly. Yeah.
In addition, the HUD report found in 2022, the winding down of pandemic protections and programs focused on preventing evictions may also have contributed to more people finding themselves homeless in the first month of 2023. Quote, we must address the main driver of homelessness and housing instability, the gap between low incomes and rent costs. These people, I can see why they get paid the big bucks.
Yeah, I know.
Said Peggy Bailey, vice president.
Solve the problem of people not having enough money to pay for
people
rent.
don't seem to have enough money to pay the rent, and we think that has something to do with homelessness. Mm-hmm. In the nearly 1 year since the HUD count was conducted, the administration has taken several steps aimed at preventing homelessness and supporting the unhoused. Through implementation of the Housing Supply Action Plan, more apartments are on track to be built this year than any year on record. This week, HUD announced that it has helped more than 424,000 households connect to homeless support services.
Oh, that's good.
Exit homelessness or avoid homelessness altogether in 2023. Earlier this month, the VA announced that it has housed more than 38,000 homeless veterans. So, yeah, I told somebody because my rent, because I've been in the same building for 17 years and we have rent stabilization in New York, my rent is really unusually low. I always tell people I would never move to New York now because I'd be paying what the rent is now. Absolutely no way in hell. But I told somebody what I was going to charge to rent out my apartment while I'm gone, and they were credulous. I was like, no, I'll get it. I'll get that. And I did. No, because it's very cheap relative to New York rent. It's just that what you pay in rent now is ridiculous. It's just such a what cheap is not cheap, not relative to what people are making, not relative to the economy. It's like what I'm charging is fair relative to what my rent is and the fact that I'm not going to be here. So the person's going to have the place to themselves. But is it cheap? I mean, I guess so if that's the national average. I mean, maybe it's cheap somewhere else too.
Well, New York,
it's dirt cheap for New York.
New York is getting so bad that the city is actually making some adjustments to make life harder on homeless people. And so we're going to show a brief clip from a video that Russell found. This is from the Moon YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Yeah, this is from Moon. They do some really good work. They do some really good videos. We probably have some fans of them in the audience, I would think. So they did a really interesting video. Just coincidentally, Keaton had already said he wanted to do this segment. And at the same exact time this dropped, they did a whole video about how cities are coming up with different ways to make it impossible for homeless people to sit anywhere or lay down anywhere. Now, if you live in New York, you're very familiar with the flanges on ledges outside of buildings so that nobody can sit on the ledge outside the building. But they're taking it to a whole other level. Some of these I've seen, and I hadn't even thought about why they were doing it. So we'll just take a look at a couple of minutes of this.
Even at a glance, we can see the obvious contempt and facets of our own economy, legislature, and social constructs. Our entire society at its core is designed to make life uncomfortable for the poor, whilst absolving those at the top from their feelings of guilt. But what if this idea goes beyond the intangible? What if it's all around us? What if the train station you use for your daily commute, something as innocuous as a public restroom, or even the park bench you occasionally sit on during lunch hour, all do a small part in maintaining this distance between the haves and have-nots? I'm talking about hostile or, quote, defensive architecture, and if you're not familiar, you really should be, because it's now seemingly everywhere, especially if you live in a city. Just look at New York, for example. In the past decade, the city has been turning up the dial and weaponizing the design of their public spaces against the homeless.
And what happened in the winter, because you have a lot of homeless people in New York City, because of both mental illness and also the fact that a shitty studio apartment can cost upwards of $2,200, is you had people that would sleep on these grates so that they wouldn't freeze to death. What they do is they put this stuff over it so that it's actually painful. Now you can't lie down on this to sleep because not only is it a metal grate, but it also sticks up in certain sections. Like you can see this one sticks up higher.
Sticking to your back as you lay down.
So that if somebody were to lie down on this, they would actually feel physical pain.
Some of the more subtle iterations of this have included installing large metal bars on public benches, or making them so shallow that nobody can lay down or even loiter on them comfortably for longer than a few minutes. Some New York City subway stations and bus stops have even done away with public benches altogether in favor of leaning benches. And like I said, these are subtle versions of defensive architecture. There are far...
All right, so it goes on for a while because that's about a 12-minute video. But yeah, look at those examples. Look at those examples. A narrow bench that you can't lay down on. You have that metal bench with the raised pieces. You have the leaner. I have not lived in New York for a while, so I haven't seen those lean benches that you have on the subway walls. But that must be more recent, right?
Yeah, that's what I was asking you. Were you out of town by the time they introduced that?
I was. I have not seen those. That's new. Back when I lived there, you could still take a nap in a subway station. That's how luxurious New York was back in the mid 2010s there.
Well, you know what? I will tell you something. That last thing there.
Egregious versions of this in New York City alone. For example,
hang on, that last thing they were showing was Grand Central, right?
Yep.
Okay, so Grand Central. Okay, off to the left here in this lobby. Okay, so you used to have layovers when people, before jet travel, with people really travel by train. Sometimes you would have 12-hour layovers. Sometimes you would have 4-hour layovers. So this whole area, the Vanderbilt lobby here, they used to have benches that were designed for you, and they had lockers and they had showers. And that was still there into the 80s. So by that time, it became a homeless encampment because nobody needed it to stay there between train trips at that point. But it was one of those cultural inertia things. They didn't get rid of it. So they finally got rid of it in the 90s, which, is an early example of this, of them trying to change the environment to make it unaccommodating to homeless people. But it's just such a sick society that would create circumstances where people financially can't afford a place to live. And then you make it impossible for them to find a place to sleep on the street. And with the grates, that's really psychopathic because the reason they lay on grates is for warmth. That's to make sure people can't get warmth in the wintertime.
It's just unbelievable. And, I used to see homeless people out in the wintertime, when it was 4 degrees. And, I was thinking to myself, just go down in the subway, go down in the subway station. At least it's warm there. And now they're making it impossible to even do that. Making it known through those very subtle but recognizable choices that they don't want them really anywhere. And so where the hell are they supposed to go?
Right. And in New York, this started under Giuliani, who's kind of his karma's coming back on him now. But he's the one who really started enforcing old vagrancy laws that were still on the books to force people out of subway stations, out of bus stations, out of places that were warm. Now, because in New York, and this has come up now because of the Abbott and DeSantis sending migrants to New York, we have a shelter law that anyone who needs shelter has to be offered shelter. But those shelters were so dangerous that none of the homeless people wanted to stay in them. You go in there, you get beat up, you get robbed, you get stabbed. Nobody wanted to stay in these shelters. So you got given this choice. You could freeze out on the street, or you could go risk your life in a shelter. And it doesn't seem like that's really changed. If anything, over the course of my life, because of what he's talking about here, defensive architecture, they've just made it harder and harder and just more brutal, even as the city has become increasingly unaffordable.
Please clap.